Hello. Again. Welcome to the Smeth Den. I hate you. Every time I have to fucking tell you hello. Fucking hate it. Hate you. I have to fucking be there for you. Every time I fucking stream, every time I make my fucking art, I have to be there for you. Every fucking time I have to show up. I hate you. Now that that's out of my system, why don't I get my fucking link out? It's a bit early, but that's okay, that's good. What's HSTS? HSTS is homosexual transsexual. It is a part of a two-part dichotomy created by Ray Blanchard. AGP is autogynephilia, and HSTS is homosexual transsexual. The theory suggests that these are two sides of these are two different reasons people transition and become trans. But I don't think that they're meaningfully different. No, it doesn't mean history. It means homosexual transsexual. I don't disbelieve AGP. It's AGP, autogynephilia. There's way more research on autogynephilia. Yeah, I don't believe in HSTS. I'm believing it. I'll talk to you about, you'll hear all about why. I'm going to tell Phil about it. Typical incorrect man. How the fuck would you know? I'm closer to the truth than you are. HTTP, strict transport security. That's exactly it. I don't believe in HTTP, strict transport security. It's a total fucking myth. I don't believe in this myth, this Greek mythology of HTTP, strict transport security. These these fucking computer scientists and their data science, all their code, all their fancy AI. I only believe in dirt. I only believe in dirt and sun and wind. Theoretically, fire. Bullshit cryptographers. Yeah. The code isn't real, man. We made it up. The code isn't real. We made it up. Most psychological diagnoses and labels and categorizations are things we made up for a narrative reason, and they're the clusters of things, but we can't ever actually prove them like completely. They are heuristics for understanding and putting human behavior into a narrative. And I have a problem with the HSTS narrative, as it is a separation from AGP. So in a narrative way, I don't think it makes sense to even use it. We live in the Matrix. Maybe you live in the Matrix. I want to talk about my last stream last night a little bit. Bro, I don't enjoy these panels most of the time. I think I did a decent job of making it entertaining to watch, and I think it was the music kept it a little bit okay, and I thought that Fairy Queen did a really good job. But in general, these fucking panels are just so. Most of the time, I will fucking say shit that is interesting and adds more complexity to the topic, and other streamers, that is like a threat to them because they're not ready to engage with that, and it would put me in an advantage because I've thought more about it and I'm smarter than them. So so whenever I will like add complexity to the subject, people will just completely ignore it and go right back to screaming about whatever retarded bullshit that they were saying over and 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 fucking over again, over and over and over and over. And it's just so, and it's like, for me to become so impassioned and scream over them to assert this more complex issue takes a lot of energy, and sometimes I don't have that to just, because for them to put that energy in, they're just screaming, but I have to scream and be articulate at the same time to counteract that, and I have to scream while being way more thoughtful than they're being, and they're just gonna try to shut me down. A lot of these panels are not designed for like you got two people on this side and two people on this side, and you're supposed to fight. And I mean, Wick knows that. Wick knows that that's what he's doing. That's the game. That's what people come for. And he also knows that I'm good at engaging in the conflict, but for me, I'm not so entrenched in some dumb, extreme position. Like, I mean, I'll take extreme idealistic positions, but I'm not like that stream was so much about who it has it worse, men or women, and just like Stardust fucking screaming about how awful men is, like just screaming statistics about how awful men are. Bro, who was that even fucking for? They want the yelling, give Wick his money shot. Well, yeah, well, I want the yelling too. But the yelling is so much better when you actually get... Like, I will yell and I will create space for myself, and I will express a complicated idea about the topic. And then people will be like, anyway, what I was saying is, men are 100% of the rapists, and men are 100%, and just completely ignore it, or Wick will fucking interrupt and then be like, okay, thank you, Seth, we're gonna read this super chat, okay, back to you, and completely fucking bulldoze any fucking thing I just said. I have to fucking construct a fucking complicated house, and I keep constructing it over and over and over again, and then everybody just fucking... They're not even there to tear down the house that I've built. They're not even in the same neighborhood. And so, like, I have to drive across 3 counties with my fucking bus. I have to pay for gas. And I pick them up again. Hey, get the fuck in the fucking bus. Drive them all the way back to the neighborhood where I constructed this house that's designed just for this fucking stream, just for this fucking conversation. It's designed just for them, and I want them to enter this house I built for them. And then I open the fucking door to the bus, and it turns out they fucking jumped out the window immediately, and they're not in the bus anymore. So now I gotta go back to the gas station. I gotta go fill it up again, go all the way back, and it's so much fucking time and energy for nothing. And with the panel, with there being so many people, it's really hard to force somebody to actually engage with you, because all the effort that you put into forcing somebody to actually engage with you is completely destroyed when the next person also doesn't want to engage with you, and they go right back to whatever dumb thing. Are men horny? How does one even begin to debate questions like this? Yeah, men are horny. The most engagement I got in that stream, I was able to ask questions about things that Fairy Queen said, and so there was a little bit of back and forth in that, and I like talking to Fairy Queen. The most engagement other than that I got with any topic or any idea that I put forward was my idea that women are secretly horny but have to repress it. And then people were like, oh, that sounds weird. And then we just moved on. Because yeah, Fairy Queen is great to talk to. Yeah, I've always thought that about her. She tends to do something that I find very annoying, but I respect her nonetheless. But she tends to spout off tons and tons of statistics and data, which is I think that's why Stardust was doing that. I think that's why Stardust was screaming statistics. But Fairy Queen tends to have it's still annoying when she does it, but I like it. She's smart. But I like that she didn't do so much statistics repetition that time, because I do like talking to her, and if she's going to keep giving statistics and studies, it's not like I'm talking to a real person, you know? It's like I'm talking to ChatGPT at that point, in a way. Okay. Fairy Queen's a blast, legitimately interrogative. Yeah. You can engage with her. Yeah. She's like, a lot of these people just try to stop you from saying whatever you're trying to say. She actually engages with what you're trying to say, sometimes in a way that's like frustrating, because she'll like actually be like, well, this study contradicts you, and that's hard to contend with, but she is engaging. Okay, I'm gonna call up Phil. Okay. And I want to do this. Hello? Phil? Oh, Phil's not here yet. Yes, I'm wearing a blanket. Might take a while to get around to picking up. I don't know. The gates of hell just opened in Smeth's bedroom. My bedroom is the gates of hell. Any woman that has ever known me can tell you that. Ruby Spakes K says, my bedroom's the gates of heaven. I've seen it. You're not doing you're not really selling it to anybody, the gates of heaven. It seems like you're trying to dissuade people from religiosity if that's what the fucking gates of heaven looks like, huh? You're like a napkin blankets. Napkin blankets. Hey. Hello?
Hello?
Hey. What's up? Let me get you you popped up. I'm live right now.
Okay.
Okay. So I've talked to you once before. Last time that I talked to you, I haven't rewatched that conversation in a while, but in general, I feel like I was a very coy person at that period.
Yeah.
You said that you enjoyed.
Were you holding back?
Yeah, I was. And also I have a new idea. So I mentioned this to you in DMs, and you said that there's not a lot of research on HSTS. But of anybody to talk to, I think you would be one of the best people to talk to about this. I don't think it is real, but in a way, like all like psychological kind of diagnoses and stuff, they're only real in that they're like a narrative description to organize data together in a way that can be applied to people. Like a personality disorder is a cluster of observations and statistics that you organize into a narrative that can be applied to people. That's the way I see it. So it is real in that way. It is a narrative, and it can describe a cluster of things. But I don't think it's meaningfully distinct from AGP. Actually, I just think it's and the way I see it play out in these communities is people that are HSTS or identify as HSTS are just like saying how awful AGPs are, and they're trying to use that to like say that they're the good ones, they're the better ones, you know?
Right, I do see that dynamic quite a bit. I think quite a few of the people that identify as HSTS online and hate on the AGPs, they're not actually HSTS. It seems that AGPs, at least like among male to female transsexuals, the AGPs are already a majority in terms of the population numbers, and then online that gets skewed even further. They're even more prevalent online. So there's few like actual like homosexual transsexuals that maintain online presences on social media and build up audiences and followings and such.
Okay. So you don't believe those HSTSs that say that they are, you know?
It's a case by case basis. There's some that are, and then there's some that are not. I think like a lot of AGPs have issues with shame and with dealing with the effect on their self-image of the autogynephilia theory. And so for some of them, it's safer. There seems to be this thing where they'll convince themselves that they've only been attracted to men their whole lives, and that they're definitely not that AGP type. They're the other, like the homosexual type, which they see as like good or true trans, but that's not how it actually is. Both are just different types of trans. Neither is better than the other, but that doesn't stop a lot of people from thinking that the HSTS type is more true or better.
Yeah, another observation that I have, and feel free, I'm what you just said, I'm kind of just agreeing with. I think that sounds reasonable, but I want you to like challenge my observations here.
Okay, well, I'll try not to interrupt you though. Like if I can tell that you're still talking, like
sure,
I'll let you roll with it. Yeah.
A lot of the people that identify as HSTS transitioned very early, and the differences that they point out in themselves with other trans people, I feel, are not because they're HSTS or anything. It's just because you transition early. So they one thing they like to
gloat, impassibility.
That's the one they like to gloat about the most. But also their behavioral and sexual self. I feel like having transitioned very early is going to make you develop sexually in a very different way. So they'll be like, oh, I'm less sex obsessed than this person that like transitioned when they're 25. And I'm like, yeah, but if you started hormones when you were, 15, then I feel like you probably would be less sex obsessed.
Right. You kind of nuked your libido quite a bit.
Yeah.
Like during that developmental period. Of course, you're going to be overtly less sex obsessed. And also, like if they're autogynephilic, then they'll be sort of racking up a lot of the femininity points or whatever, however you think of it. They'll be attaining feminine embodiment simply through existing as an estrogenized person. So that they'll probably have less need to do the sort of behaviors that is sort of seen as common among AGPs of, say, like cross-dressing with sexual arousal and things like that. And since they're on hormones, they'll also be less likely to even notice that the feelings they're feeling are connected to arousal, because they won't have erections making it like undeniable.
Yeah, well, that's something I want to ask you about, because to me, I don't see why HSTS would be not connected to arousal, because it seems like it would be. It's just connected to arousal, but also you're gay.
Well, it's connected to your sexuality, but I don't think the that the feminization itself can be is arousing for them in the same way.
That sounds. Sorry, I'll let you.
Well, it's just that there's like the way I sort of think about gender variance is that there's two types, and like everyone naturally differs in their degree of masculinity and femininity. Like that just varies in individuals, and among homosexuals that will be like exaggerated, the gender nonconformity, and it to levels that can sometimes lead to gender dysphoria and the desire to live as the other sex. And then there's the other type of gender variance is the autosexual type, which is basically the inverted sexuality. And they're basically like two types of gender inversion, and one is in the like sexual gender psychological realm, and the other one is in terms of the direction of the sexual orientation is pointed a different way. And so there will be autogynephilic transsexuals that also, because people have natural varying degrees of masculinity and femininity, there will be some autogynephilic transsexuals who are naturally somewhat feminine compared to the average male, independent of their autogynephilia, but then the autogynephilia is an additive thing towards the gender variant. So it's sort of like they can have natural femininity plus the autosexual thing.
Well, when you say natural femininity, I don't necessarily think that is a bedrock trait. Like the natural femininity you're saying develops because of them being homosexual, and homosexuals tend to have more natural feminine traits. But why? And the way I have always conceptualized that is, if you are like a gay man, basically a gay bottom, and you want to be kind of girly, because that's how you conceive of sex. You conceive of sex as, well, I want like a man to, like, you know, for crude way of saying it, but to top me. And if you want a man to top you, then you see yourself as more feminine, and then embodying that is a sexual thing. So you're embodying the femininity. It's still an autosexual thing, right? That's the way it feels.
Right, like I think, like, behaviorally it will be hard to tell the difference between the two. I think that psychologically, though, there's different motivations. Like there are gay bottoms that, like, they just prefer bottoming, but they're not thinking like, wow, this bottoming symbolizes my femininity and that's so hot, you know. I just think oh shit, I forgot what I was gonna say. There's with I thought of something while you were talking, and then I finished and I forgot it.
Oh, you can interrupt me, by the way, then, like, especially if that's the case.
Yeah, well, I'll never know when I'm gonna forget something. It just, you only know once it happens. But yeah, I think, like, so males and females have a different, like, mating psychology on average, and because there's fundamentally two different types of humans, like the two sexes, and like each of these different reproductive strategies has a different type of psychology associated with it, and it is seen in cases of homosexuality that there's sort of a cross-gender shift in mental traits and various things, you know, in terms of like psychometric things, like whether people are interested in things versus people, or whether they have better, like, social skills or better, like, visuospatial abilities. You know, there's psychological sex differences that sort of, you see them in homosexuals. There's a cross-gender shift associated with the homosexuality, and if I remember correctly, in some of the studies I've seen, it seems to be about, like, maybe a fourth, on average, like a fourth the size of the sex difference between males and females in general.
So you're saying if there's being gay can give you a physiologically shift you about your body,
like a psychological shift, like that being a homosexual male will make you, like, on average, homosexual males are more feminine in psychological traits, and, you know, the inverse goes for lesbians.
Yeah, but why?
Because there's these two different, there's male and female psychologies that pertain, like, each, it's an evolutionary thing that each sex has a different optimal reproduction strategy, an optimal way of behaving, and that means there's a different optimal ways of thinking.
That's kind of what I think, and it makes me, that really gives me a lot. There's so much overlap between this type of discussion in feminism, I think, in general, because that makes me think a lot about how women are, like, socialized just by what is the word, by their nature of their body and their relationship to other human beings. There's a word for that, but I forget it. There's, like, because you know that when you have sex, you are like receiving it in your vagina, and there's, like, and it's going to go through, you're going to be in that kind of position. It's going to make you relate to other people different. And if you're a gay man and you see yourself in that position, you'll relate to other men that in the same different way, such that you could have that, you know, 1/4 shift psychologically towards more of a woman. And if a man can shift 1/4 of the way they're behaviorally just by conceptualizing himself sexually in that way, then how much of a shift could be enacted in all big swaths of people in different social environments?
Yeah, I'm not really sure how to answer that question.
It's not so much of a question. I'm just kind of throwing an idea out there. Does it sound? Do you have a aversion to it, or are you resistant to it?
I wasn't quite sure. Can you describe it again? The idea?
So if conceptualizing you as a gay man, your self-conception of yourself in a sexual self-conception as a gay man, you imagine yourself getting penetrated by another man. You imagine yourself submitting to another man. That if that in itself can shift your behavior 1/4 of the way towards being more like a woman behaviorally, then that means 1/4 of women's behavior is their self-conception by their physiology and their role in sex in itself. So if we if you raised women to peg men, then that 1/4 of their behavior would be more manly.
Yeah. Well, so the claim I was making wasn't that like the way someone sees themselves makes them behave a different way. It's more that the different types of sexual behaviors, whether you're top or bottom, it correlates with masculinity and femininity and with sexual orientation. And so as far as I know, among gay men, the tops will on average be a little more masculine in psychological traits than the bottoms. And kind of whether you're like the mounter or the mountee is kind of one of the fundamental aspects of mating psychology. You sort of that, whether you're the one that's mounted or the one that's mounting, is like scientists have been able to alter that behavior in rats, for example, by administering hormones during various developmental periods. And
wow.
Like they can get females to be the ones that try mounting people and not mounting people, rats, but but
yeah.
But yeah, like there's a lot of mating psychology that is tied to, like, associated with masculinity and femininity.
So you're only sure of the correlation, but you're not sure exactly how that plays out causally.
Right, yeah. I mean, I think causally that the organizational hypothesis of sexual development related to hormonal exposure in utero and, around birth organizes people's brains in ways that alter their psychology for the rest of their lives. There's sort of irreversible changes that happen due to hormonal exposure during certain windows. And yeah, and that's responsible for a lot of the sex differences in psychology and behavior.
I don't like that, but that sounds completely plausible. But my worldview enables me to conceptualize myself as someone who could change, and that means it's more solid, and that's scary.
Yeah, and for males, it's also a little more rigid too. At least with matters of sexuality, male sexual orientation is fairly fixed and rigid post puberty, post adolescence. If someone they're unlikely to change whether they're attracted to men or women, for example. And of course there'll be exceptions, like in cases of autogynephilia, where someone at first is attracted to women, but then they start developing meta attraction, and then they can shift towards being attracted to men over time. But that's not necessarily the sexual orientation changing so much as like their autogynephilia building up a cross-gender identity within themselves that alters their sexual behavior. Like the underlying orientation of autogynephilia stays throughout, and it just manifests differently.
I had an ex that was very into the autogynephilia type stuff, and the trans stuff psychologically. She was a psychologist, and one thing that comes to mind, I don't have the research in front of me. I don't know what I'm talking about, but maybe this sounds familiar. She was saying that there is a protein in males that that's more present in males than females, that when exposed to testosterone changes, and the theory is that men are actually more likely to be able to change their kinks by having experiences while they're horny.
I haven't heard anything about this.
Yeah, and I do think that you can change your kinks and fetishes and stuff, but I think the mechanism that works is by attaching them to pre-existing kinks and fetishes and stuff, and then and then eventually though it becomes kind of its own thing on itself, because it's like you're taking a bubble and then you're like pushing it and making it split into more bubbles, but
I think the phenomenon you're talking about, like where say like a male can sort of change their kinks or fetishes over time, I think it's that they had the pre-existing predisposition towards having various paraphilic sexual interests, and when they seemingly change, it's not so much that their underlying orientation has changed so much as they have multiple paraphilic interests, and they're doing paraphilic substitution of switching one out for the other. The pattern is usually that people will switch if they have sexual interests that are injurious to their self-image, they're ego dystonic and they don't like the fact that they are aroused by that thing. If they have other atypical sexual interests that they can substitute for that, then they'll often switch to that one that is more positive with relating to its impact on their self-image.
Socially acceptable.
Well, it'll correlate with social acceptability, but I think it's related more to like whether they feel icky about themselves afterwards, like they want to minimize feeling bad about themselves because of their sexuality.
Yeah.
Like I know in Lawrence's book, there was an example of an autogynephilic transsexual who was doing a lot of the sort of like the body integrity dysphoria, pretending like she's pretending to be mobility impaired and using like walkers and crutches and stuff as like a sexual thing, and then but that they sort of had this realization like, what am I doing? This is so crazy and weird. And they were also into autogynephilia as well, and they decided to instead transition and channel their sexuality into their autogynephilia because that was less strange than the pretending to be disabled.
Okay, I have a very weird and slightly embarrassing one, but I didn't have a foot fetish at all. And then I thought, wouldn't it be fun to try to give myself a foot fetish? And so
did you do that?
And I managed to do it, but I did it by adapting it from just general humiliation kink, and now it just like feet actually just on their own, like it doesn't feel like a humiliation thing. It's just now that's just
right. You just like the feet.
Yeah, but it was the humiliation thing, but now it's that. It's completely its own thing now.
Were you like averse to feet before? Like were they? Did you dislike them?
I was just neutral. If I disliked them, it might have meant that I actually did like them. I think.
Right. Yeah. See. Yeah. I don't. It's hard to say when. I mean, as far as I could tell, you have multiple. Like you have multiple atypical sexual interests, just or like generally have a kinkiness that is
Yeah.
above average.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you do have that, you'll have a lot of different, say, like options for what can trigger your sexual psychology, and it'll be easier to switch between them and cycle them out. And, you know, at some point you might even there's a good chance you'll find something else that's better than feet, and you'll move on to that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a big part of the thing that excites me about feet right now is that, like, people say you shouldn't like feet or whatever, and it's like, I don't know, there's something like
That could tie into masochism then, if it's something that would be seen as like degrading.
It's also not just masochism. It's not it's that women get no pleasure from my interest in their feet, and I'm so sick of focusing on a woman's pleasure. Like, yeah, like I don't like, how much do you want to like talk about me like specifically? But there's like I have like some weird sexual dysfunction going on, like that. You seem to enjoy me describing my own weird sexual brain here, but
well, I mean, I'm fine with talking about pretty much anything sexuality related.
Okay, so
yeah,
I it's hard for me to stay hard. I can be very good at pleasuring another person, and like I completely like take my whole brain and absorb my brain with simulating everything about their brains so much that like I'm like I try to be very in tune with their experience. If I'm doing that, I lose my boner, and for me to maintain a boner, I have to be focused on myself and not them. And so like in women who like want you to basically like embody like a force of nature that can't stop himself. I cannot stop myself. I just need to fuck you.
Yeah.
But also be really good at pleasuring her and in tune with her needs. And I can't do those both at the same time. So
I know they want kind of a contradictory thing.
Yes. So my my psychological solution is, well, fuck you. I just want your feet. You don't even care. That gives you nothing. And then that makes me be able to compartmentalize my own desire and my own self. So, and that's one where it doesn't even have to be very BDSM or anything. Like it gives me an out. It gives me a psychological out where it's like, this is my time. The foot time is my time. You know what I mean? So,
right, that you get to focus on yourself for a bit instead of the other person.
Yeah.
And honestly, like if you do have, I know you mentioned like being autogynephilic before, like if like there probably is some, like if you are autogynephilic, then there's going to be like getting to focus on yourself for a bit will, even if it's not necessarily like in a feminized way, just focusing on yourself would be sexually interesting because it's autosexuality.
Yeah. I have dissected, since we last talked, I've dissected my autogynephilia more, and I think that it isn't so clear cut. Like I think that as somebody with a lot of weird kinks and weird what was the word you used? Well,
like paraphilic.
Yeah. So I feel like so the way it describes it, like visually, before like growing a foot fetish is like splitting a bubble, so you have two bubbles. I see if you're very paraphilic, you have a lot of these bubbles, and like if you started early, you have like they're big, they have a lot of air in them, and you can split them into more and more things. And I think that my autogynephilia wasn't a bedrock bubble. I think that it came from a bunch of other things. I think looking back to like early sexual development and when I was like little, I think it was that a humiliation thing, and the humiliation thing, and also where I was socially in high school. I was shy and I had attention from women, but I didn't know how to. I was only interested in unavailable women, and I don't know, I just had a weird relationship with women, and also a humiliation thing. And I was like, I wanted to have a relationship with women that wasn't the way that it already was, because I was only interested in unavailable women. So I needed to create a fantasy in which I could engage sexually with women, that wasn't the way that it would actually happen in reality, because reality wasn't good enough. So, because it needed to be unavailable, unattainable, right? I needed to have like a something. So I created this idea where I would need to become a woman, and that felt like humiliating and stuff. And then eventually, then listening to people talk about like trans stuff and growing up in that time period, then I was like, I am a woman. And then I really got, and it completely, through starting to respect women and learning about feminism and stuff and seeing women as equals, then I lost the humiliation part, and that completely went away. And it kind of took a lot. So then it was just, I am a woman. And then it kept shifting into different things like that.
Yeah, masochism and autogynephilia are quite correlated. Like, they often co-occur in individuals. And so, I mean, my guess, just based on what you described, is that you have both autogynephilia and masochism as part of your sexual psychology, and those have developed, like, you've experienced them in different ways throughout your life. Like you were saying, at first it was sort of degrading to be feminized or think of yourself as a woman, but then you started to respect them, and then you just liked being a woman. I sort of like, I often think that when it comes to like our narrative identities, like our stories of like how our sexuality came to be, whatever it is, I think that the explanation is often just, I tend to lean essentialist, where like people had these pre-existing predispositions and they had experiences through their lives which tapped into them in various ways, and then they naturally formed a narrative about how those things developed. But
so you're saying
scientists haven't even.
You're saying that my narrative is not scientific, and that's just a post applied in post.
Basically, that everyone does that. Yeah, that is normal for us to. We constantly have narrative. We constantly update our narrative identity, our story of who we are and how we came to be that way. And
yeah,
scientists don't even yet know exactly, what the exact mechanisms of sexual orientation. So it's basically, we're going to create these stories about ourselves, but it's ultimately unknown how.
Yeah. I don't have as much. I think that psychology is a literary field. It is not a, like, people say it's not a hard science. I think that it is a soft science, in that it is taking data and taking studies and research and then putting it together and creating a narrative out of it. So so you can have like different psychologists come to different conclusions, and to be one of those guys, you have to be very creative and like a writer. You have to be a good linguist, and you have to be able to tie together these. You have to be a narrative writer.
There's a lot of verbal abilities that people need to express their ideas in science and in psychology.
So you think it's a hard science?
No, I'm not saying it's a hard science, but that there's a lot of statistical analysis in a lot of psychology studies. Like, for example, like the big 5 personality traits. That's not just like a cool story someone thought of. It's like they asked people a bunch of questions about their personality, and then they noticed that there seemed to be, these different underlying factors that kept recurring across a whole bunch of different studies. And it's basically like these statistical artifacts and it's not that anyone started with a narrative about how it was. It was revealed through statistical analyses that people have these underlying factors to their psychology. And same with intelligence research too.
But I don't agree with you.
Okay.
But only mostly. I don't even think it's semantic. I think that the nodules that you end up falling on in that process of like, in the big five, you could say that there are these very core traits that you can then collect together. You can define people by these core traits, and you can put them together like building blocks to build other things. I think even those core traits are, in the end, something you can break down into more things. And I think that can actually probably be done, because if you're building the core traits off of statistics, in a statistical analysis, rather than what it would be truly hard for a human to comprehend, a mechanical analysis of the human brain to understand what is happening on a mechanical level, we're not smart enough to personally conceive that. We would need a billion.
No, only through story can we kind of understand.
Exactly.
Create pictures.
Yes, exactly. So
the story is limited, though.
But our understanding of psychology is therefore going to be limited.
Oh yeah, it is. It's going to be limited by how smart we are and our stage of technological development. It's very complex, but the sort of, say, like, the most like solid thing in all of psychology is probably the G factor, IQ, intelligence, like whatever that psychological construct. It's super well established. It's been measured so many times, hundreds, thousands of times, and it keeps reoccurring. It seems to be real. That there are people that are more generally intelligent than others. And
when you say real, it means consistent, right? You mean consistent.
It means describing. When I say real, I use the correspondence theory of truth. So it's like whatever best matches whatever's describing literal, objective reality.
But I mean, you're determining that by it being consistent. Right?
Yeah, that I can have a high confidence that it is true because of its consistency over time, and so many scientists have measured it and are probably tried to disprove their rivals, and then, through that argumentation.
I can get on board with that. But I still don't like, just in the field of psychology, I don't like saying or conceiving of things as truth, because I think at the end of the day they are all still narratives. Like the word intelligence is in itself an extremely abstract thing, and to call an abstract thing truth takes a lot away from your ability to conceive of it, in my opinion.
Well, I mean, but you would agree that there are people that are more intelligent than other people, right? That people vary.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right. So, like, you've probably observed in your life that this trait seems to exist and varies between individuals.
Yeah, but I can also conceive of somebody that could be like really dumb in so many ways, but like actually they're a genius in some ways. Like autism, like they're like autism. There's autistic savants, but in certain contexts they're gonna seem really dumb. Yes, I'm not saying all autists are. I'm just saying,
Right. But so intelligence in psychology, it's a general factor that basically it was discovered when by Charles Spearman, I think in 1904. He was studying English school children, and he noticed that students who scored well on one measure of thing, like being good at math or classics, the ones that scored best in one skill tended to also score highly on other skills. Basically, that there seemed to be an underlying factor that was contributing to success across multiple domains. And further research has borne out that he was correct about that. It doesn't stop people from arguing about it because it's very contentious. The idea that people have different levels of intelligence can strike people as unjust.
It's not that. I just think that it's just vague and generalized. That's all. Which
Yeah, it's hard to in words describe exactly what intelligence is. It's basically the ability to catch on, learn things quickly, observe patterns, and just basically like be aware of your surroundings and mentally model it, and then think of, smart ways of dealing with your environment.
even in that, I've already everything you just said. I've already dissolved and created so many loopholes into what you're saying. Like, I think that your ability to tackle difficult subjects and stuff is highly emotional, and I think that this, even in mathematics, you have to have a certain emotional relationship to the challenges in themselves, and in just having that, you are more intelligent. Sometimes in math that might be being more emotionally detached from it, but that might not even be the case. And I just think it is so intertwined with so many other things that it can't be one thing. It is a heuristic that represents the relationship between a lot of different things that we don't fully understand.
Yeah, intelligence is not directly measured. It's always inferred based on the way, like an IQ test, you'll be administered dozens of tests over many hours.
Right.
And no individual test tells you a person's intelligence. They infer the intelligence based on how well you perform across like all the tests in terms of like just your overall level of ability.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's real. I would say it's a proven functional system of analysis and of human behavioral analysis that you can depend on, but that doesn't mean it is the real thing itself.
It's also correlated with brain size, for example.
Sure.
So I do think it is objectively true.
We define truth as different. That's what's the thing is.
Right. Yeah. What theory of truth do you use?
I don't know, but I think it's that truth has to be a bedrock thing, and something that I've adopted lately is abstract ideas. I don't define abstract ideas as truth. Abstract ideas like intelligence is an abstract idea, but it's a consistent, useful, predictable abstract idea. But what it means is a lot of other shit that interacts in complicated ways, and also there's probably factors that go into it that we don't even know that we don't know. So I think that if you can break it down into more bedrock things, eventually, if it can't be broken down anymore, that's where I define truth.
Yeah, it's hard for me to know like what that means in practice. I mean, it sounds in some ways that you're talking about the correspondence theory of truth, or that you would use that heuristic, that basically truth is that which describes reality. But yeah, there's a few different theories of truth.
Okay, here's a really funny way to do it. But if someone told you to draw a picture of truth, or not, sure, truth applies because it's also an abstract idea. So truth in itself, and by my definition, isn't a truth. But if someone told you to draw a picture of intelligence, you can't. You can draw a picture of glasses. You can draw a picture of, like anything.
You can draw things you associate with it,
yes,
but you can't draw the thing itself.
And so the things you can draw, I believe, those are true things, and the things you can't draw can be related to true things, but they're not true.
Well, it's the drawing example is hard when we're talking about psychological constructs, because just by the nature of them, they are kind of immaterial. I mean, they represent, I think, mechanistically how the person's anatomy is like physically behaving, but we can't directly observe that.
Right.
And so, Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the hard part about psychology. It has a bit of wiggliness to it. That means it's not a hard science, but
That's why I
there's
like
some
it.
hardness to it.
I'm a creative my skill is narrative thing. Like, I'm good at constructing narratives. That's why I like psychology, because people who are good at constructing narratives are able to make contributions. So
They can also be very wrong.
Sure.
With very little effort. Like, basically, narrative construction is very easy compared to... Like, basically, being a word cell is way easier than being a shape rotator.
I'm not saying I'm
think...
a word cell. I'm saying I'm a shape rotator. I like to, like, narrative construction. I'm talking about a creative process. I like a... Yeah, I'm not talking about a marketing process or something. Or when you say word cell, you're throwing a lot of extra.
You know what that means, right? It's just that in psychological traits, there's people that tend to have the sort of like mechanistic, abstract thinking, the sort of type of thinking that makes someone good at mathematics. Like, that's one aspect of intelligence, and there's also people that are really good with words and ideas and themes and things, and that's the verbal aspect of intelligence. It's basically...
I'm not really I'm actually bad at verbal. Anyway, I wanted to ask you about some other things too, because this one...
we got off track with
Sure, but and also, once you've broken it down, this is the way every conversation should kind of go. Because you're talking about a topic, and then, well, we got shifted into intelligence, but we were trying to break it down to our core axioms, and we found kind of the disagreement, right? So, and then we kept moving around. It's not a direct path, but we've ended up able to find a core disagreement.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the disagreement is. I think we agree we can't directly observe, like, psychological traits. I think we agree on that. We have to, like, indirectly observe them.
Yeah. So that's why I just think nothing in psychology can be true.
Well, I mean, I think you could say you can't have 100% confidence that it's true. Like, maybe you can't be completely confident that it's true.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that truth, I define truth by the direct observation.
By the ability to... Yeah, see, I think some things are true even if you can't observe them.
Well, sure, like, you could mathematically prove them, but we can't mathematically, like, we can't mathematically prove psychology other than statistical analysis. And statistical analysis means you are working on a limited amount of information. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're working on... I just think we are always going to be working on a limited amount of information in psychology. Until we have fucking AIs helping us, I don't think we're... I don't know, I need to... Yeah.
Yeah. Have you looked up the different theories of truth before? Like,
no.
I did when I learned about autogynephilia, and then I had a bunch of people tell me I was wrong about it. I was sort of like doubting my reality, and then I was like, what even is true? Like, what does that mean? And so I had to go down to the basics and sort of learn some epistemology stuff of, like, how do we know what we know? What is truth? And
I don't think I believe
really
in truth. Yeah, I think that I don't believe in truth. I believe there are things that are not abstract, and there are things that are abstract, and those are different types of understanding. But I think that our understanding of psychology is inherently abstract, which means it's different from something that is like, you can talk about what happens inside of the sun, and you can prove it mathematically. And so you don't have to observe it directly, but that's not abstract like psychology is abstract. You can, it is something you are directly going for, like math.
Yeah, well, physics has a mathematical regularity to it that psychology doesn't.
Well, I think it does. We just aren't smart enough to be able to ever.
Well, not yet. Yeah,
right.
just not
That's
yet.
what I'm saying. So until it has that mathematical regularity, then I conceive of it in a different way.
Yeah, I think of things. There are things that are true that, like, our ability to know, to determine whether something is true does not impact whether something actually is true. That I think there is an objective reality, and we can imperfectly understand it better over time through science, but we'll never fully know everything.
All right. You are the man in the blue dress.
Yeah.
That's what people know.
Yeah.
That's what people know you as. Okay, and so
Fair enough.
The criticism is that you're always getting your rocks off. Even right now, you're wearing a dress. So I mean, you could be getting your rocks off.
I am.
You are getting your rocks off?
Yeah, I'm wearing a dress. No, I'm wearing a dress. Yeah, no, I'm not. No, like, there's no way I'm going to be, like, if I can, being able to have these intelligent, abstract conversations is not something I would be able to do in a state of sexual arousal. They're different modes of being. And so, yeah, I mean, a lot of the TERFs got mad at me because they thought the fact that I was wearing a dress meant I was, like, being just, like, rock hard 24/7. And they just...
What you just said makes it a little more... I would have found it easier if you had said something else, because women dress sexy all the time, and we allow them that, like, you're allowed to feel sexy if you're a woman. And so I feel like a lot of AGPs, like, it's not that you are rock hard all the time, but, like, when you're getting dressed, it's like, oh, that makes me feel sexy. And, like, who fucking cares? As long as you're not wearing, like, something that, like, is very exposing, you know, you don't have, like, you know, your nipples out or whatever, your assless chaps, I don't know, what, like, stuff you shouldn't wear in public. You're wearing stuff that people wear in public. It's just not what normal. It's not what you normally see all the time. But you're not, like, indecent. And
yeah, I had plenty of flesh covered. My shoulders were exposed, but that's it.
But
I was fully covered up.
Who cares if you actually feel sexy, though?
Right, but the thing is, like, I don't actually. It's not as if, like, I dress in women's clothes every day, and it's not like I'm just, if I see myself, I think, wow, I'm sexy. Like, that's not it. It's that there's something about autogynephilia where, like, I need to attain some degree of symbolizing femininity to feel like emotional well-being, or to raise my baseline state of emotional well-being. And wearing women's clothes makes I feel better on average when I'm doing that than when I'm not.
It's really interesting. I just want to let you know my stomach is in pain, so we might have to, like, if I'm a little bit stunted, like, I feel like I could have been smarter in that last conversation, but I'm in, like, intestinal pain. But we can go a little bit longer. But you're also autistic, right? And I think that this is going to help. What I'm about to say. Okay, so I feel like most people, when they hear that, they will think that, well, if you're putting yourself in a position where people will now be saying these things about you, how could that actually, people are perceiving you in these negative ways, how could that give you emotional well-being? Because it seems contradictory. You know, I'm treating you like shit.
Well, I'm not
right
doing
now.
it for other people.
I know, but, like, their thought process is, if this makes me treat you like shit, how in the hell can you call that emotional well-being? Basically, is their thought. You know.
Well, in everyday life, people don't treat me like shit for it. And honestly, when I was at the actual conference, the GenSpec conference, people were not treating me like shit about it. It was fine. It was literally a gender conference. If they couldn't handle a man in a dress, then they don't belong there. Yeah, no, people there were fine. It was just online on Twitter when, you know how Twitter is. It gets real ugly, and people read so much into just like these tiny little sentences and strips of text, and they just like create this huge picture of who you are, and they actually just have no idea.
Yeah. So when you pick clothes that you think, this makes me feel safe or something?
It's not any conscious thoughts of that. It's just I prefer women's clothes, and I would not. I know that it's because of autogynephilia, because I've learned so much about it, but I had no idea why I would want such things before I learned about autogynephilia. I just knew that like I kind of wanted to wear them, but held back because like that's not what men are supposed to do. But then once I learned about autogynephilia, I was like, oh, this is part of me that's I can't use logic to make this go away. So I'm gonna stop trying to repress through willpower. I'm just gonna sort of do various forms of cross-gender embodiment. Typically, the clothing is the biggest thing I do, just because it's the one that's the most accessible with the least downsides, as far as I can tell. You know, like if I started wearing, say, like hip pads and breastplates, like to get sort of an anatomic embodiment, I think I would start developing more anatomic gender dysphoria, and I don't want to do that. And so
you think it would make you get more gender dysphoria?
Yeah, that it would be fun at first. You know, it would feel really good at first. Then it becomes normal, and then once it becomes normal, and you don't feel anything about it, and then you'll naturally want more. And then, or if you decide, like, say you start wearing the breastplates, and you know, after a year or so, like, it just feels completely normal to you. That's just who you are. It becomes like incorporated in your self-concept almost. If you were to stop wearing the breastplate at that point, you would feel something is missing, that there's this thing lacking that should actually be there, and you develop like the dysphoria and incongruence.
Okay. All right. Allow me to psychoanalyze you a little bit, but I see something in there that I think is very interesting. Maybe you won't disagree, but baked into that is the idea that you don't want it to be normal. And
I don't want to become habituated to it and
sure,
to need it and rely on it.
I'm going to tell you something you don't think about yourself, okay? That's what I'm saying. So I feel like, and perfectly justified, and I think it's like a good reason if that were the case, but it's basically like a big fuck you to the gender and the expectations that you've been placed into. You know, so you don't want to feel normal in that because you want to rebel against it. And almost, and if that's the case, then it's almost like people getting pissed about you wearing a dress is almost like the point. Do you disagree?
I don't understand.
If you don't want it to be normal and habituated, you want it to be something that feels transgressive. You want to feel like you are being transgressive of the very thing that you were told that you are.
Oh, I don't do, like, in terms of like wearing women's clothes, it's not for transgression. I don't care what other people think. I wear it because I like it. It's pretty much that simple.
Well, I mean, transgressive against yourself.
No, I just like it. It's just like I have this part of my psychology that makes me want to be feminine or woman-like, and the clothing is the simplest way of doing that, of symbolizing that to my brain with the least amount of downsides, and so that's what I do.
Okay.
Right, like I know the people got the TERFs got mad at the gender, not at the gender conference, after the gender conference online, like, you know, because they've been creating anti-AGP propaganda and exposing themselves to it for years on end, so they're just like, you give them the smallest little impetus for attack and they'll just go for it. They're already like programmed, and they think that me wearing women's clothes is somehow mocking them, or
no,
you know,
I don't think that
them.
I don't think that like when I said like their response is part of it, I don't think that you are mocking them. Really, what I meant by that was it's within yourself, because like if you're raised a boy and you become a man, and I have a lot of resentment about that and those expectations, and for me to wear a dress, I feel like I could get on board with like that just being to myself a big fuck you to that thing that I'm being forced into. You know what I mean? And it's like
right, like not wanting to be forced into gender norms.
Yeah. You're freeing. It's a freeing escape, you know?
Right. Yeah. I'm kind of indifferent to gender norms at this point. So like personally, I don't think I have much transgression behind it with how I think about it. I just, it's not even something I consider, because it doesn't matter to me.
But why do you then prefer stuff that represents feminine gender norms?
Because I'm autogynephilic.
So, but yeah, I know, but then that you're not totally indifferent, right?
Well, it's I don't care whether the things are norms. What matters is that it symbolizes femininity in some way. And I'm, in the way I'm describing this, it's not that it is not my conscious thought when I'm putting on clothing that like I'm doing this to symbolize femininity. I'm basically just talking about it through the lens of my understanding of how autogynephilia seems to work, just based on all the studies that I've read and all the observation I've done of.
That seems like a good policy, because it's hard to understand yourself on that level. Like, I've been writing about myself lately, and it's just, I've learned so much more about myself by writing about other people than I have just about writing about myself. So yeah.
It's easier. Like if you share a trait with other people, you can learn about yourself by learning about all the other people. Sort of the composite image of all those other people gives you insight into what you're like. I've been writing this paper called Becoming Max, and I've been describing this guy's psychology, and then I created it like with a lot of like rewriting and really compacting it down to like a diamond. So it's like so I just feel so confident in it, and then seeing myself do exactly the thing I was describing behaviorally, and being like, I did not think that this was about me, and now I'm like horrified. You know what I mean? And that's what I've been going through lately. Yeah, well, I think often with people can be interested in other people that share a trait with them, even though they might not consciously realize that's part of why they're interested. Yeah.
I thought I shared a trait with this guy that was different from this trait. And now I'm freaked out because this is not a good trait. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's the downside of self-exploration sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Or even, just self-exploration through understanding others. Is like sometimes you can learn about a negative trait and then realize, oh, I have that.
Yeah, it's almost like if you looked up to Marilyn Manson, and then you're like, so why is he fucked up? You know, what makes him fucked up? Because clearly he's not like clearly perfectly healthy, you know? And then you figure out what that is so that you can be like, oh, because like I like this part of him, but what is this part, you know? And then you figure out this part and you're like, oh, I'm actually this part. You know, that's why I like this part, because I'm actually this part, and that's not good, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you feel? I don't know. I feel like you said you didn't want to talk about this. I won't even attempt it. It's a tangential thing to the thing you said you didn't want to talk about, but I respect that.
Okay.
But, so I don't want to attempt it anyway. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, I do. It's subsiding, but I still do have intestinal pain. I have like a lot of viewers right now too. It's very weird, but yeah, I have a lot of intestinal pain right now for some reason. So
Yeah.
might have to end it.
Do you have to go?
Yeah, I have to go.
Okay.
It's been good talking to you. Do you have any other thoughts? Like, I can still go. It's actually subsiding a little bit, but I can't think of another main.
Have you tried taking any sips of water, or does that not? Do you
Okay.
just know that won't help?
I think that. Well, I have water right here. What I think it is. Okay, there's something. If you take Adderall, which is something I take.
Yeah, I do too.
Sometimes you get something called the Adderall shit. Like after you take it, then you get and it's like it does subside, and I think it's starting to subside. But in the meantime, you have like a lot of intestinal pain. You know what I'm talking about?
I don't have the digestive issues from amphetamine, but
it's not really an issue. It's like a temporary, like it just everything wants to come out, and you just take a big dump, and it.
Right. I mean, that's a general. Yeah, I've noticed that general property of stimulants. You know, like that'll happen with nicotine or. You know, LSD or whatever, anything that's like dopaminergic and stimulating. But yeah, I don't have that experience with it, but I take it every day at a pretty low dose.
Let's talk about that. Okay, some people say that you shouldn't take it every day and should take breaks. I think that that's wrong. Like when you do that, it makes it so that when you take it, it feels like, oh, it's actually doing something. But I think that you needed for it to be healthy, you need to make it a regular thing. If it doesn't feel like it's doing anything, that's actually kind of the best case, you know? Smooth.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could take days off, but I've just noticed if I do that, on those days off, I'm basically like, I can't do anything besides like watch Netflix or just like scroll social media feeds. Like I'm just like a dopamine seeking missile that doesn't really have much agency. And so I just try to take, I think the best way to do amphetamine is to take the least amount that is effective. And yeah, the least amount that is effective is the best way of doing it, because the more you take, it'll spend your neurotransmitters faster, but then that'll lead to like sort of an escalating dosage situation. So I actually take less than when I was first taking it, because my understanding of amphetamine is, yeah, the less you take, the better it works in terms of like long-term effectiveness.
Wow, that's I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a weird thing with it where you don't want. I know that some people, they got the idea of microdosing from LSD and stuff, and some people have tried to apply it to other drugs. You definitely do not want to do that with amphetamine. I just want to mention that, because there's this weird sort of reaction that happens where it can lead to, in some people, if you try taking like a microdose of it, say like 1 milligram or something, mm-hmm. it can create a semi-permanent upregulation of your dopamine receptors that lasts for like months or years, and then it's a really bad condition to be in.
Wow.
But yeah, I just think like a low stable dose is the best.
I like the idea of taking days off because it makes me a dopamine fiend, because I want to learn. I wish that I wasn't diagnosed, and I feel like as a kid, if I hadn't been given the drugs, then I would have developed coping mechanisms and I would be better off now.
Oh, you got it as a kid?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that having...
Yeah, I only got it as an adult.
Yeah, people that... When I was a kid, some of my classmates would say stuff like, I got it, but I hate taking it because it makes my heart race, or other random things, and I just look at them like they're just like stupid. Like, I have all the coping mechanisms to deal with all of these side effects you're talking about. That's not an issue for me whatsoever. It's like second nature. But I don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with not being on it at all. So
right.
I want to not be on it. But not being on it means
it gives you executive functioning.
Yeah, but not being on it, I want to learn how to not be on it, but not being on it makes me total just miserable, very miserable.
Yeah. Right, yeah. It's hard, like the coping mechanisms to not need it require executive functioning to implement, but then you don't have that executive functioning if you're not on it. So it's really hard to get off. I mean, I started taking it in my 30s as an adult, because I knew that I had ADHD and that it was holding me back from being able to do regular people stuff. And then once I started taking it regularly around the time that I learned about autogynephilia, and I mean, it kept me hella focused on that interest.
So
it led to me writing a book. Like that book wouldn't have happened without dextroamphetamine, and I actually even like thank it in the in the acknowledgement section.
That's funny. I wonder, this is not probably true necessarily, but I wonder if there's this, it would be funny if there's some kind of correlation between taking amphetamines and being AGP, and then they discover, oh shit, it's actually just amphetamines. It's probably not the case, but
well, I think there's a correlation between
ADHD,
between like autism and
yeah, having
autosexuality, and I think that ADHD and autism are correlated.
Yeah.
Too, and they share a lot of common genetic factors. So I think, yeah, you are going to see among like the gender variant population, autosexuals, there's going to be a higher proportion of ADHD there.
Well, you've touched on something that I'm now. Okay, this is something. This is it. Past me wouldn't have brought this up because it's scary to bring up to the guy who's so passionate about autogynephilia. But there's also a correlation between autosexuality and personality disorders like narcissism.
Yeah, there have been. I know there's like the exact correlation is not known. Right now, there's a study being run that can help look in that. It's asking questions about both narcissism and autogynephilia. We might be able to see if there's a correlation there, but so far there hasn't actually been good, robust data collected on whether there is a correlation. It's just something people have kind of observed, that among transsexuals they have a higher proportion of personality disorders, and then they infer that that's from the autogynephilia.
Well, hold on.
But we don't know yet.
The thing that I heard was when you're doing a deep pathological analysis of narcissism, then you get a narcissist perceives other people as internal objects. That's why they have such a difficulty simulating someone's like different mind from their own, because they define what your mind is to themselves, and that's why they treat you as if you should be thinking what they're thinking, and if you deviate from their ideal image of you, then you are in the wrong, and they might lash out at you. So they don't actually perceive as other people in a healthy way, and in a way they only perceive as other people as part of themselves. And so all sexuality, so Sam Vaknin, who is one of the head leading psychologists in narcissism, talks about how all narcissist sexuality is autosexuality.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I haven't looked too much into narcissism, like exactly what it is, um, and how it operates. So it'll be too hard. It'll be hard for me to say like exactly, like with any confidence, much stuff about narcissism. Um, yeah, and it's like I don't, for example, like I don't even know, are there like different types of narcissism? Like, are there
Yeah,
different ideologies of it? You know?
yeah. There's different types, but I think the core, the the idea is because I just like I've been saying, I think that these are narratives that make sense of data and observation in the science. But the idea is that a narcissist has basically the idea that they have a massive ego is completely wrong. They have like no ego. They have a super ego. So they have a greater conception of themselves, but their actual ego is like, because of childhood abuse and experiences, they have a lot of voices in their head. Like we all have voices in our head. They're called introjects. They have very negative ones, like their parents maybe, or people that they looked up to, very important voices in their head telling them how awful they are. And so their actual ego is very small, and they need to get narcissistic supply, is the narcissistic supply, by causing other people to react. They need to act grandiose so that other people tell them, like, as if they have an ego. I mean, they need to learn about their ego by making other people react to them. So that's but I'm not the expert. So, but that's what I've been looking
Right,
into.
and I know there's like two different that people
Covert
are differentiating between grandiose and vulnerable narcissism as well.
and covert.
That and there's a covert one. Yeah,
The covert is the
yeah,
vulnerable one. The covert narcissist is the one
right,
that's always going to be, even the grandiose. To be a victim is a very grandiose thing, but a covert narcissist is always focused on their grandioseness is done through victimhood or through, so somebody who is always talking about how everything is always wrong and everybody else is at fault for everything that's happening to them. They're still putting themselves at the center of reality. They're not saying I'm God of the
right,
world, but they're still saying I'm the only thing that really matters, and they're not thinking about anybody else. So it's
right. Yeah, that's still kind of narcissism, and I sometimes call that the unfun kind of narcissism, just in terms
yeah.
of like,
Yeah,
the like there's like there's bombastic people say like Trump, for instance, that's obvious grandiose narcissist, but like, and that can be sort of like entertaining and fun to some
yeah,
degree.
yeah,
But then like the vulnerable, the covert ones, they're just like, they'll seem normal, but then if they feel slighted or put down or ridiculed in some way, it'll like trigger a lot of really
yeah,
victimization psychology.
yeah. I think it's worth looking into the connection between autosexuality and narcissism. If nothing more than, this would be one of those psychological journeys where, I mean, I'm interested, I want to know, but also it might make me learn something bad about myself. You know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I should look into it too, just because so many times people just say that autogynephilia is just narcissism, and I don't think it is. I think it's a sexual orientation, but like I should still learn about narcissism to at least be able to like refute any falsehoods I see
But what if they're right?
regarding.
What if they're right?
Then I would say they're right. Like if I find that it is true that there is a connection, then I'll say that. Um,
But yeah, but I mean,
yeah.
what about to you though? What if they're right? Like, like, can
Oh,
you
about
live with
me
that?
being one?
Would you then what would you think about yourself? You know what I mean? Like, that's that
Eh,
proposition is I don't like.
if it's true, then it's true. Like
Do you think
I
you're a
don't fret too much
narcissist?
about it. No, I don't think so. I haven't taken any psychometric scales to sort of test though, in terms of in a measurable way. I don't think I am though, because like I got attacked pretty heavily for say like wearing a dress to a gender conference, but like it's not like it was hurting my self-image at all,
What did
and I
it?
wasn't feeling
Did it grow
like
your
majorly
self-image?
victimized. Did it what? My self-image?
Did it grow your self-image?
Um, I don't think it had much of an impact. Uh, um, it was like distracting, just because it's like if there's this big swarm of like angry people gossiping about you, like that draws some attention. But I knew going into doing this work talking about autosexuality that I was going to be attacked no matter how pure or good I am. I will be attacked simply for treating autogynephilia as true.
Have you
Um,
seen Envy and Desire, some
yeah.
short film by someone who's self-described HSTS?
Oh, she describes herself as a HSTS?
I
Okay,
don't know
because
that first. I'm pretty sure.
okay,
I'm
okay,
not.
because
I might be wrong. I'm pretty sure though.
okay, because I did a stream a few days ago, and someone mentioned her, and I'm like, yeah, that's an example of a HSTS, and that's just based on like me just inferring based on
I know the
how she talks and everything.
people she associates talk about HSTS, and like the other trans woman in that film that was like the other lead.
Yeah,
I think I talked to her briefly. She talks about how she's HSTS, and there's also a correlation with the people that self-identify as HSTS as people that are more socially conservative too.
yeah. Well, homosexual transsexualism is kind of a way. It's partially a strategy for fitting into society. It's in Western individualist countries, the homosexual type is less common, but relative to the autosexual type. But then in Eastern collectivist countries, the homosexual type is more prevalent, and it seems that that societal homophobia contributes to that sort of.
Right, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
If there wasn't the homophobia, then you wouldn't feel uncomfortable in your own skin. It makes sense that they would feel like to fit in as somebody that wants to have sex with men as a man, then I should be a woman, and I'm wrong for being a man, you know.
Right.
It still seems like autosexual though, because it's still a sexual shift in the sexual conception of themselves. Like the idea of being I can't it has to be. The idea of changing your sex of your body and wanting to do that just seems like it is inherently sexual. And I think that's the thing about Ray Blanchard's theory that freaks people out, because they hear that there's a sexual element, there's a core psychosexual element to being trans, and they're like, no, we've been trying so hard to tell everybody that's not the case. We don't want to admit that's not the case, but it is the case. And I feel like HSTS really are the people that are clinging really hard to saying that it is not sexual, but they're just trying to avoid the truth.
Well, that's just a different type of. It's still psychosexual for the HSTS, but it's a different type of sexuality that, it's a different path to getting to the same sort of place of deciding you want to transition. But I don't think they have the direct sexual interest in feminine embodiment in the same way that the autogynephilic ones do. I think the HSTS they're naturally quite feminine, like unavoidably so, where like they couldn't even suppress it, such that other people wouldn't notice it.
But that's also
even if they tried.
That's also so self-fulfilling, because so many of them transition so early. Because for that to be the case, for you to be you would probably transition very early, because you are naturally so feminine. You are already transitioning so early. So
I mean, they tend to transition earlier because that gender nonconformity is visible from like the earliest years, from like ages 3 or 4 or whatever. Like a lot of them will have obviously be gender nonconforming with respect to, say, like whatever toys they want to play with or the sort of people they want to socialize with the way they socialize.
I don't think you can be trans until you're. I think.
Yeah. Well, I'm not saying those kids are trans. I'm saying that they have an inborn gender nonconformity that arose alongside their homosexuality, and it's linked to the homosexuality. And it arrives earlier because.
Do you think people are born gay and born straight?
Yeah.
I don't.
They're like that. They're either like that. I mean, at birth they can't have any type of sexuality. Like maybe they have a wider range of potentialities when they're born that gets sort of narrowed down as they develop in childhood and then hit puberty. But I do think, I mean, at least, well, the different sexes are so different. So I guess I'm specifically thinking of males here. But the people that have homosexual gender dysphoria, at least like what clinicians have seen, like in the past decades, is that there are some kids that are like pervasively gender nonconforming. They can't avoid it even if they wanted to, and then they almost invariably during puberty, once they develop their sexual attractions, they're almost all homosexual. And it's like, even though there's tremendous societal forces to try to suppress, you know, the homosexuality or the gender nonconforming behavior, they still are that way. So I lean towards it being due to inborn factors. I tend to be sort of essentialist in general.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main differences between our thinking here, because I think that there's a lot. I conceive of sexuality as something that can change and shift and warp into different things. It's not that I don't think that it's like you are straight and then you become gay. I think it's that you could be straight, start thinking about men in a similar way to the way you think about women, such that the bubble like comes up a little bit and then it slowly forms into a new bubble, and then the old bubble can disappear. And so like I think it shifts into it, and I think our sexuality can shift into these other things. I think that we develop our sexual attraction, and I like in different cultures people are attracted to different traits, and I think it has to do, and I don't think there's anything wrong with being like, because when so much of the civil rights of gay of like the gay civil rights were pivoted on it being an essential trait. And I think that was to the disservice of a true understanding of human nature. I don't think it matters if it's essential or not, and I don't think it is essential, but it's still not hurting anybody to be gay, so it shouldn't matter. But
yeah, I think it for males that it's much less fluid and flexible. That for females, I could see more of an argument for them having fluidity and it not being like just a strictly inborn thing. But at least with males, it does seem to be a pretty stable inborn thing. You know, for example, like Anne Lawrence's book, there's plenty of she has some narratives in there from autogynephilic transsexuals that are saying, you know, they first were aroused by the idea of being a woman at like age 4 or 5 or 6. Like there's some really early cases in there, and it's hard for me to imagine that that's somehow something that arose due to their life experiences or society, and it seems to be something that's more just an inborn part of them. I
had some of those too, and that kind of contradicts the story that I told you about it being much more of a masochistic thing at first, because I remember being like in kindergarten and thinking it would be, or like maybe not kindergarten, but definitely in elementary school, thinking about how it'd be so exciting to be wearing girls' clothes and like in an all-girls school. But I still think
and it's like, where'd that come from?
But
I
think it's because I'm an only child, and I liked girls. I noticed that hanging out with guys, there was this weird behavior that I had adapted myself, where it's the guys versus the girls, and the girls have cooties. But I still liked the girls, and I was still interested in the girls, and my fantasy dissolved those boundaries. But like, what if I actually was a girl? Then I would be in that world. I wouldn't have to do I would have the cooties. What if I had cooties? And then I could be able to, because I distanced myself from the girls, and I didn't want to. So that's what I think was I see it all so much more dynamically, and I'm very resistant to finding essential things. I'm constantly trying to dissolve anything as soon as you think you believe and understand the world, I'm going to be trying to gaslight you and try to make it not make sense anymore, because I want it to be dynamic. It makes sense to me that way.
Well, I think it makes sense to think in an essential way with regards to some traits, say like there's a lot of traits that are highly heritable, like intelligence, or say like the propensity for autism or ADHD, or personality disorders. Like there's twin studies have shown that it seems that genetic factors are the majority of contribution to those conditions. And so, yeah, it's just like, have you ever looked at like various twin studies and heritability? Like,
yeah, okay,
it's really worth looking into.
People bring up twin studies to me to tell me that I'm wrong about all this stuff. But I mean, I do settle on things being essential, but you have to really fight me. You have to really fight me. And
you'll like begrudgingly accept it if you're like, fine,
because I think it should be. I think that you fall on the. I distracted myself. I think that you fall on the conclusion that something is essential when you have exhausted all other options. That's how you prove it's essential, because there's no other way to prove it. You can't.
Well, I mean, I think the scientific process in general does that it tries to disprove anything, and then eventually whatever ceases to be disproven is accepted as provisionally true. I think that's just sort of the general process.
And they don't do every single thing. Like, they will disprove everything they can disprove, but then there will be things that they can't disprove, and they'll just go with it a lot of the time.
Yeah. I mean, if a lot of people try to disprove something and then keep finding that it seems to be true, I think it makes sense to provisionally accept that as true.
Yeah, but that contradicts my general analysis of thinking of things in terms of systems. So within a given system, something is going to always seem true, but if you change the system, then it won't seem true.
That's very abstract. It's hard for me to know, like, I would need specifics to be able to like argue for or against that.
Example of systems thinking, classic psychology systems is family systems. And you can use family systems thinking to apply to like society and stuff, but in general, family systems, people have different roles, and within a certain family system with a certain type of parent and a certain type of mom and a certain type of dad, a certain type of brother and a certain type of sister, you're in the mix, and you have a role that you're going to fulfill, and you only have so it's going to create outcomes for you. Maybe you're the troubled child, or there's something wrong with you, you're mentally ill, or maybe you actually kind of are mentally ill, but you're mentally ill because of the environment you're in and the people around you. and yeah, it is your role in that system. And if you were to change parts of the system or intervene, it would change you.
Yeah, were you just making the point that like we're inextricably linked with our environment?
Yeah, I'm saying when you're talking about essentializing things, like the point that we're so linked to our environment, nature versus nurture is the argument, and I'm saying that
It's nature and nurture. Like a lot of people do the versus thing, but like Galton originally coined it as nature and nurture. That both are true and contribute.
sure, but and I agree that there is nature and nurture. It's just I don't settle on things being nature until the system itself has been tested, the system that it's within.
Yeah, I call that from the other way of assuming that we're the product of evolution by natural selection, and that works through DNA and genes, and so we're an animal,
I agree.
and that it makes sense to assume a lot of things are genetic as a baseline assumption before knowing anything, and then as you learn more you can adjust. But like I start with just assuming that people who they are, a large proportion of who they are is the result of their genes.
While I do, I mean, we're coming to the end of like what we, but while I do agree that most of who you are is your genes, like I have a hand, how many genes go into that? Like so much of that behaviorally, I think that there is definitely some of it that is essential, but so much of it, humans are just the way we engage with the world is extremely social. The way that we relate to things and conceive of things. If you were to take a human and have them raised like a feral human, have you ever heard of Jeannie? She's a child.
The wolf boy?
No, I don't know about the wolf boy, but Jeannie, she's called a feral child, but what really happened was her parents locked her in a room in this like chair that had like a baby chair thing, and they would put food in there once in a while, and but like not enough. She was like super skinny, and she got no socialization, like no interaction, no stimulation at all, and she was effectively mentally retarded for the rest of her life. She never got more than like a 200 word vocabulary. And I think that so much of our psychology and our understanding of the world and our ability to comprehend and think comes from, it's like we have hardware, and most animals have a lot of hard-coded like hardware that strictly does what it does. But I think humans have a lot of software. And the software,
well, I mean, that's true,
is learned
but
socially.
Yeah, no, that is true. There's that case you're mentioning shows. I mean, that's sort of an example of like that during development we have certain critical windows in which you can learn various types of things. There's sort of just a general path of development, and that if you don't learn certain things within certain windows of development, then sort of the door closes on it and you can't learn it anymore, or you could learn it but only with great difficulty at a later point. And so like I'd agree with you that compared to other animals we are more software based, and our incredibly long developmental period is kind of testament to how much learning we have to do in our lives. Just like our extended adolescence, that's not something that other apes have. It's specifically a human thing.
I mean, I'm more likely to date somebody that went to college because I feel like they got an even more extended adolescence. They people people that went to college. It's not that you went to college and learned college things. It's that you got to be a kid longer. And I feel like those people are going to have more in common with me because I got to be a kid longer.
Yeah, and like I went to college too, and had that experience, a very extended adolescence, and I think that extended adolescence can also kind of lead to a really, a pretty advanced stage of development, like later on, but like it took a lot of work up front.
I guess you seem to agree with that, but I don't think we can prove the hardware without disproving the software first. And we can prove the software. You can make social changes that will inherently prove or disprove the existence of metaphorically a software understanding, like a socially learned understanding or way to interact, or socially learned social behavior. So I think those are the only things you can prove, and then you can only prove the essential properties by disproving every possible software property.
I think we just differ on our which one we default to. Like, I default to genes unless proven otherwise, and you default towards like the social environment until proven otherwise, right?
I've done a lot. So I've fought really hard about women, like they're exactly the same. Now I don't think they're exactly the same. I think that they're but I fought to get there. And
right, yeah. And I've heard of other AGPs that like initially were very like blank slate, that like men and women are the same. They didn't want to believe that they're different, but then begrudgingly learned more and were like, okay, yeah, they're different and we're different.
Yeah. It's actually been really positive for me though, because if you do believe in blank slateism between the sexes, it's going to lead to so much resentment. And I think that resentment is part of what I think makes you AGP, because you want to be that, because you see the difference and you want to have what they have. But I think if you see them as blank slate, what the fuck is wrong with you? You know what I mean? And you get mad, and it makes you feel like shit. And
like there's a lot of feminist discourse that's just like, why can't men be this particular way? And the way they're wanting men to be is like women, and it's
and vice versa.
Yeah, exactly. And people are like, why can't the other sex just be different?
Why can't men just stop raping?
Right. It's like, obviously we should have strong social norms against that and punish people for doing that.
Yeah.
But I think it's like in our evolutionary history, that was a viable reproduction strategy.
Yeah.
For a subset of males, and so that behavior persists.
Yeah. That's RGB.
There's a book called A Natural History of Rape that goes into sort of the evolutionary logic behind it. I remember after I was done, I was like, wow, that was a bummer, because I don't want to, that topic is,
you don't want to believe that you are a born rapist.
Well, I mean, I'm not. And I think most males are not. And the social changes that have been made in the past decades, due to like feminist influence, have also improved male behavior in that respect. I think there will be limits about, like, there's a great deal of social engineering that can be done, but that we're going to push up against the limits of social engineering, and the only way to progress further would be to change the genes.
I don't agree. I do not agree. Absolutely don't. Absolutely. That horrifies me. Okay.
You think people can be anything? Like, as long as they have the right social environment to sort of coax them into
so
it?
Let's say that you have a problem child who literally cannot stop raping everybody in the family. I believe...
This is such a crazy hypothetical.
I believe that you can create a system in which that child can just have a decent, normal life and not hurt anybody. And
I think that child needs to be separated from other people because of the harm they're causing.
well, yeah, if that's what's necessary, but like it up until that point, like, yeah, they shouldn't be alone in the room with their sister. Like that's like a given, and you change their environment to fit. I don't think humans are wrong. I don't think humans can be wrong. I think that the environment is wrong. And if we have a society where people are like doing crime and hurting each other and raping, it means that we haven't gotten society right yet.
Something interesting about that though is that like different populations have different crime rates. Even like,
Yeah, but
like people that have
black people, but they exist within a system.
Right. The crime rates differ between like different ancestral populations, right? Like for instance, East Asians will have a very low crime rate, even lower than Europeans.
I don't think
And-
there is an environment. So like if it is true that black people do more crime, there's an environment where they don't, clearly. So I just it doesn't even matter to me.
Yeah, well, what environment is that where they don't in your hypothetical?
Like the environment I live in, pretty much. I mean, I think it's pretty clear. Like black suburban like kids that grow up in white areas, they don't join gangs and end up having a life of crime.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's definitely socioeconomic factors are definitely an influence because, crime rates have changed, over the past decades. People's rates of having, children out of wedlock or being married a long time, like those have changed over the past decades. So it's clear that the social environment is definitely a big influence because genes don't change that fast. So it's clearly not genes.
It's interesting that you say it like that because you assume it's genes first and then go. But I think that's you can't do it that way. Yeah.
Well, I mean, for this example of like different crime rates based on ancestry, I wouldn't necessarily assume genes first, or like. I think there's a lot of good reasons to think things like crime rates are related to society.
But not AGP.
No, I mean, autogynephilia will manifest differently in different societies. Like the sort of things the AGP individual autogynephilic person finds attractive will vary depending on the culture they're born into, because that'll alter what signifies femininity, what is attractive in women. It'll alter how they want to be. Like the transvestites that lived in Berlin over a century ago, they were interested in different things than the femboys of today. But they're all AGP.
So you think that there's a baseline, consistent amount of AGP individuals, and
yeah, and society will influence like which proportion act on it and to what degree. But yeah, there's a baseline rate of autogynephilia across various populations.
I think that people are more likely to be autogynephilic now than ever. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, I think we're just more likely to see it and have it not be like this private thing that they suppressed their whole life. There used to be more sanctions, so there was more of an incentive to suppress it. And so now I think it's just we can see better what was always there, but maybe not visible.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I actually, with this type of, I think that it probably is something way more men have and still repress. I think it's probably so I think that everybody is
like, what percent of men do you think have it?
Like, hold on, I don't know about that. I think basically 100% of men have latent homosexuality.
Then why are the vast majority of men? Why do they only report attraction to women and identify as heterosexual?
Because it's latent, and they haven't like it would be like at some point, like you're a 30-year-old man, the ability for you to foster that latent part of yourself gets diminished and diminished and diminished and diminished. Your access to that thing, that child within you that has that potentiality is so so much further away. So I think that that's I just yeah. And I just think the same thing with like AGP. I think that everybody has latent AGP and a latent autosexuality. I think that society makes women, and so I think I've mentioned this before, but I think that women are on a baseline kind of AGP, and they kind of get a thrill out of their own sexualization. And I don't think that's inherent to them. I think that's because of the world that we live in.
So I think women can exhibit behaviors that superficially resemble that of autogynephilic males.
But it's not the same essential thing. So,
it has a different underlying cause, I think.
But that's the thing I don't assume. I know you think that, because I know...
Well, I have evolutionary logic where it's the females... Like, male sexuality is very appearance-based. And females know this. And they therefore care a lot about their appearance because this has a big impact on their evolutionary success.
Okay.
And yeah.
I counterpoint me again. But so I definitely was more visual based with my sexuality. That started like porn has stopped working for me. Like it through becoming...
That's rough. You're like, I've seen it all and it does nothing anymore.
No, also through becoming more... I've always been the person who psychoanalyzes everybody around me. And through doing streaming and stuff and having these conversations, like that's the part that I kind of like I'm leaning on, and it's part of my psychology. And through fostering that part of myself, now when I look at porn, I just see the experience of the porn star in the porn and their mental illnesses and their personality disorders and their abuse. And I don't get immersed into the fantasy that they're trying to create. I just see what is actually happening on the set. I can't get into the fantasy. So now I've swapped over to more of a feminine style attraction where it's the narratives, like people's
like erotica.
One thing that gets me is like weird Reddit posts, people talking about their weird kink relationships and how they're all fucked up and shit. And I'm like ooh, like I get it because that makes me see the fantasy without doing that anymore. So yeah, and I think I think that women are more likely to have that empathetic experience with the visual because of the society we live in. And that's why they're drawn to the narrative.
So yeah, it can something about like disentangling like what is, you know, from society and what is like evolutionary history is the fact that if a lot of humans do have a trait, society will reflect that. Like, you know, people can have it. For instance, most people, I mean, I have a different mental model where I think most people are heterosexual because that's the most evolutionarily viable sexual orientation for reproduction. And that is ultimately why heteronormativity arose in society, because it's like an organic reflection of how most people are.
Of course I don't disagree with that. I'm just saying I do agree that there's things like that. I just think that like latent homosexuality is omnipresent. If you
if it's latent, like, how do you measure it? Like, how do you know it's there?
I've got it. I've got you. Okay, if you go to jail, the chances of that latent homosexuality, there's no women. They won't even let you look at porn. The
injustice of it all.
Men in jail become gay. At least
it's
while they're in jail. Yeah, but I mean, I'm saying, like, and actually, that's actually not. There's actually some data I've seen, but I don't know how I would look it up right now. It's a really annoying thing. If I were you, I would probably remember what it was, but
I've forgotten so many studies that I've read.
It's men. The thing that I remember reading was that men that are bottoms in prison that get fucked by other men are more likely to still be gay when they get out of jail. The men that do the fucking are more likely to return to being heterosexual. But once you start perceiving yourself
That's not surprising at all to me.
I know, but I'm saying that once they start perceiving themselves as the recipient, that really creates a big shift in their mind.
Oh, interesting. I perceive that more as the ones that are willing to bottom already had a more pre-existing openness.
It's probably both.
With men.
It's probably both, but they already both of them do. Both of them are gay in that when they're having gay sex, they're gay, right?
No, you can have gay sex without being gay.
Oh, come
like, I'm differentiating between the psychology and the behavior. You know, like, for instance, like, there's plenty of autogynephiles that love having sex with men, but that is a reflection of their internalized femininity rather than a direct attraction to men themselves.
Sure, it depends what definition of gay you're going by. Like,
sounds like you're using a behavioral one, where if someone does the behavior, then they are that thing.
I'm just saying.
I use a psychological one.
But why you're attracted to what so, like, if you are in prison and you're having gay sex, you're getting sexual gratification from it, and whatever psychological mechanism gets you there, like, there are 1,000,001 ways that could happen inside and outside of prison. So I guess that's why I use that definition, because who really knows what goes into, like, we can both have the same behavioral display of sexuality and behavioral kink, but it can come from totally different places. So
yeah,
but in general, heterosexuality probably does come from the same place. It's probably essential,
right? I think heterosexuality is definitely it is by far the norm, and there's good evolutionary reasons for that. And I think that's unlikely to change, and I don't think it needs to change.
Yeah, better not, because women will just get rid of men. We're so useless now.
No, I mean, it's easy to think that.
Hello? Hello? I can't. Hold on. I can't. Can you guys? I can't hear him. I don't know. I don't think you guys can hear him. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Huh, okay. Interesting. Okay. All right, we're gonna call it. All right. All right, I'll wave bye. Okay. Okay, cool. All right. Okay. So, okay, so yeah, in the end, yeah, it was a weird tech glitch. In the end, what have you learned? What have you learned? You're here to learn something, aren't you? Or are you here to learn me? What do you want to watch me go crazy? What do you want to get your fucking? You want to get your fucking claws in the fucking drama? What the fuck do you want from me, huh? Well, I don't know what the fuck you want, and I don't know why the fuck you're here. But you can't stay here. Just make sure come back next time to get your dose of methamphetamine. Come back to the Smeth then. Get your smethadone, get your methamphetamine, or else you won't be able to fucking make it through the day. There's no other fucking stream like this. Nobody else spends fucking 3 hours getting prepared for a stream. Nobody else will give you this fucking experience. They'll give you this fucking slop where they fucking just, I need to stream 8 hours a day, and they'll, whoa, guys, what's going on that I can react to? I'm desperate for content. That's not what you're gonna get from me. So why don't you fucking subscribe, and we'll get some real fucking content going. Look out for my article, Becoming Max. It's coming to a screen near you not too long from now, I'm hoping. Now that I've finished just writing about Max, now I'm writing about myself, and it's pretty hard. So it might take a little bit longer, but it's gonna fucking rock your socks off, and you're gonna freak the fuck out, and you're gonna piss yourself, and then scream. And you're about to learn an important coping mechanism, and how you react to this situation that I'm about to put you in is very critical for the rest of your life. The situation I'm about to put you in, the dire situation, I'm about to end my stream. And you can do one of many different things. One thing you can do, you can like and subscribe. You can, regardless of what else you do, you can desperately, because you cannot stand the sound of your own thoughts, you can desperately scroll through your phone, through your apps, through your Twitch, through your YouTube to find someone else to drone in the background of your thoughts. That's one thing you can do. You could start doing whatever it is that you're procrastinating. You could start your creative project. You could think about yourself in your own life. You could sit with your own pain in your thoughts. You could think about how much you're suffering and try to think forward. There's many different ways you can respond to the situation that I'm about to throw you in. Might as well be cognizant of it. And now I've forced you to. So why don't you think about the way that you're going to react to this dire situation, the silence, and the amplification of your own thoughts. Are you going to desperately search just to find someone else to drone on in your ears? It's okay. I do that too sometimes.